Many ways in which lasers can be used is the subject of our next program, General Studies.
Lasers are still new and exciting things, and scientists and technologists are always discovering ingenious ways of using them. A laser is producing these words, not by printing though, by vaporizing ink. We've got more examples of what laser heat can do in surgery and also in heavy industry. This laser takes up the whole of this huge space. This little dish holds some of the smallest lasers yet invented. All lasers, whatever their size, have to be treated with respect. They can damage your eyes, but low-power beams won't hurt you in any other way. This is a continuous beam, which you can see. Some lasers are pulsed, and some, pulsed or constant, have invisible beams, which you can only see if you interrupt them. You can split a laser beam into two and make a hologram, a 3D image in space, which you can look round. Some people think of holography as a new art form, so it may be. It can also be extremely useful. John Webster made this beautiful hologram, but he and his team make others for strictly scientific reasons.
Now what we're looking at is a model, a dummy fuel element that's taken from a British advanced gas-cooled nuclear reactor. It's made up of a graphite case, something like 1.2 meters long, into which there's 36 pins which contain the fuel. The pins are held in place by 3 grids, one at the front, one in the center, and they're all fixed firmly to the one at the back. The life cycle of an element such as this, and there's many hundreds in a nuclear reactor, is something like 5 years. When they're discharged, we want to inspect them. We want to measure their physical sizes, physical shapes, and any distortions which might have occurred. But they're biologically, by that time, very hostile. In other words, they're radioactive. They have to be examined behind a 5-6 foot thick biological shield or looked at through a very thick zinc bromide window. What we propose to do is to use a holographic camera to make this inspection. I'm aligning the element with the holographic camera. This really is the business end of the whole system. You must imagine there's a biological shield there. A cassette is posted in through the biological shield to appear in the small aperture here. It contains the holographic plate. The shutter opens, the laser's fired. 2 beams will emerge, one to illuminate the front and the other one to fold round via 2 mirrors to illuminate the back of the element, very much as a photographer would illuminate such an object as this. Holographic plate, which is simply a fine-grained photographic plate, is inserted by using a dark slide into the cassette. And the cassette is simply posted down through the biological shield.
The hologram is made with a pulsed ruby laser, but reconstructed with a continuous beam. John Webster is turning the plate round so that the image of the fuel element projects out in front of it. Now he looks at the hologram through a ground glass screen. By moving the screen through the image, he can study the inside of the element all through its length. The hologram has made the whole of a radioactive object available for inspection in safety. This use of lasers is still in the development stage. In medicine, they've been used for quite a long time. At this hospital in Sheffield, Dr. Fenton and a patient talk about one kind of laser surgery.
We use a special microscope for looking at the neck of the womb to delineate the distribution of the area of abnormal cells upon the cervix so that we can treat it using locally destructive techniques. The technique that we use in our clinic is the carbon dioxide laser. This has certain advantages in that you can judge the depth of destruction of tissue very, very accurately. There is little bleeding from the operating site, and we can use the procedure on outpatients. This is a carbon dioxide laser. In fact, it consists of a helium neon aiming beam, which tracks down this path here, through a set of zinc selenide lenses here, to a micromanipulator here. There is also a much more powerful carbon dioxide laser, which passes down exactly the same beam path. When we turn the laser on, there is a helium neon beam comes on at each occasion. This is manipulated here by using this joystick, which activates a gimbaled mirror here. When we use the laser to treat patients, we work from behind the laser, looking through the colposcope like this and working the joystick with our right hand.
This is the colposcope's view of the neck of a womb. The bright spot is the aiming beam, the helium neon one. And here's the invisible vaporizing carbon dioxide beam. This film was shot in the Sheffield clinic as a typical example of this treatment. It's not our patient's operation. It may look rather drastic, but a lot of the patients don't need any anesthetic. Now we go on a short trip into space. Lasers are useful measuring tools. This telescope and its pulsed laser can measure distance with an accuracy of within 5 centimeters over 7,000 kilometers. Of course, to do this, you need very precise knowledge of the speed of light and very fast recording techniques. Dr. John Pilkington is one of the astronomers who developed this system.
What you see here is a telescope that we're using with a short pulse laser system to measure the distance to an artificial satellite 6,000 kilometers above the Earth. By measuring the distance to this satellite and the way it changes with time, we can study both the orbit of the satellite and the way the Earth is rotating underneath it, and so we can pick up small irregularities in the rotation of the Earth. We make the measurements by sending the light up, a short pulse of light, up from the laser towards the satellite, which reflects it back down into this big telescope that you see here. When the light goes up from here, it spreads out very slightly as it goes up towards the satellite, and the patch of light that hits the satellite is perhaps a kilometer across, but only 5 centimeters or so thick. When the light comes back, it goes into this big telescope. The light actually comes up from the laser, which is downstairs, and it follows a path up through a series of mirrors and out of this small telescope on the side of the big one.
This is the Laser Geodynamic Satellite, LAGEOS for short. It's 60 centimeters in diameter, made of brass and aluminium, and covered with reflectors which bounce the laser pulses back to the telescope. The satellite is being tracked by about 20 telescopes all over the world, but only 2 or 3 of them have a ranging system as accurate as this one at the Royal Greenwich Observatory. It fires very short pulses at the rate of 10 a second, and the computer processes the measurements which the system is making. Lagios comes over Hurstmonzou 3 times every 24 hours and takes about 40 minutes to pass. The principle of bouncing laser beams from one object to another is being used in some American thinking about war in space. The laser weapon would be far more powerful than the observatory measuring one is, and it would need a sophisticated information and guidance system. But the basic idea of reflecting its beam off one object in space so that it hits another isn't hard to grasp. Making the idea actually work is quite another thing and would need years of research. In this country, the Ministry of Defense has done a lot of research into the nature of lasers and their military use.
In the 1960s, everyone used to talk about the laser as a solution looking for a problem. And that, of course, was exactly the problem that we faced in defense science. It was quite clear to us that this must have military significance, to say nothing of civil spin-off. But the problem was, what would the application be? Perhaps the most interesting dedicated defense application is the Laser Ranger Mark Target Seeker, which essentially is a rather sophisticated laser torch which marks a target for a clever weapon to seek it out. That is an area in which, as a result of work at the Royal Aircraft Establishment and the Royal Armaments Research and Development Establishment, as well as my own, there is now an industrial capability to produce these devices not only for the British forces, but for export.
The Ministry of Defense often supports university research, but not all the laser work which universities do is military or even theoretical. At Hull, they've devised a very peaceful, down-to-earth machine. Here's Dr. Richard Dewhurst.
In the manufacturing industries, there's often a need to present components of the right orientation in a production line. And it's very important that these components arrive the right way around. There are some components which are very difficult to handle in this way. In particular, I have here one type of component, a grub screw, which has defied all previous attempts to orientate. We've now devised a method at the University of Hull which can sort out these components using a laser beam. The beam comes from a helium-neon laser, travels to a mirror, from which it is reflected and hits a grub screw in a viewing zone within a bulb feeder. Now, the bulb feeder is a device that has a lot of these grub screws and vibrates in such a way that the grub screws travel up a track on the inside of the bulb to the viewing zone itself. Scattered light intensities from the laser come off the component, and the type of scattered light pattern depends on the orientation of the component. A photodiode can pick up this signature, which is led off to some microchip circuitry, and this diagnoses which orientation the grub screw is in. Those that are not wanted can be rejected with compressed air, forcing the component back into the bulb feeder. The rest of the grub screws can continue on their way to the automatic assembly point.
This machine isn't just good for getting grub screws the right way round. There's a number of different components which the laser can look at. They can be round or flat or pretty odd shapes. And now Hull University's invention has been patented and it's being manufactured to sell to industry.
There has been a very significant interest in civil spin-off from defence innovation, and we as an establishment are very keen on this and have quite a good track record in this respect. Using the ability which we've now developed to process signals from lasers, we're able to develop much more efficient jet engines and much more efficient turbochargers for diesel engines. Not a very exciting thing, but on the British roads it's saving something like £50 million a year in reduced fuel consumption.
This is another laser which is designed to improve efficiency. It's been developed at the Culham laboratory.
We at Culham are interested in developing new lasers, particularly 10 kilowatt CO2 lasers for use in industry. The lasers are big and they're powerful and they are capable of cutting and heat treatment. If you look at this camshaft here, it's possible to paint the laser beam onto these lobes to make them wear resistant and leave other parts of the shaft untreated and undistorted. It's also possible to put one hard alloy on a cheap material like cast iron, again to make it wear resistant. And quite apart from heat treatment, it's possible to cut complicated shapes, or here just a simple straight line. Now the cut quality is extremely good in this sort of material, and when you cut with the laser, it's possible to re-weld without any preparation at all. You just go straight into the welding. And this sort of laser is capable of welding steel perhaps 3/4 of an inch thick. Now, there's a tremendous interest in these new technologies all around the world, in America, Japan, and Europe, because there's a need to improve the productivity in manufacturing industry, and the laser is the answer, or one of the answers, to that problem. Here you've seen a technique which can cut, weld, and surface heat treat, and is very, very flexible, lends itself to robots and automation.
The next laser we're going to see is even bigger than this one at Culham, and it has to be kept in a dust-free atmosphere, which explains Dr. Mike Key's hat and overall.
I'm standing in the middle of the most powerful laser in Western Europe. We call it Vulcan. Vulcan is one of the family of lasers which are glass lasers. Now, that name derives from the active material of the laser. It's a special kind of glass. You can see it's pinkish, and the color derives from the atoms of the rare earth neodymium, which are incorporated into the glass. Now, to make this into a laser, the glass is exposed to very intense flash radiation from this arc lamp, which is rather like a photo flash. When the arc lamp is fired, the glass becomes amplifying to the fluorescent emission from the neodymium atoms. The heart of the laser is what we call the oscillator. It's beside me here. Now, in the oscillator, the amplifying element is placed between two parallel mirrors, so that the amplified emission bounces up and down between the mirrors. This generates a short burst of radiation during the time that the amplification is present. The light is now directed through a very complicated series of optical elements. It starts here and proceeds around through all these components which you can see in this room. Indeed, the laser fills a whole building. The beams are directed first of all down this direction, passing successively through amplifying elements which increase their power. The components of the laser are of increasing diameter as the beam is amplified in power. The reason for this is that the power of a laser becomes destructive if it's too concentrated. It's already very powerful when it starts. The power of a laser is almost 1 million watts at this point. But it passes through successive amplifiers, each of which increase the power by almost a factor of 10. So by the time it's completed the circuit, the power of a laser is approaching 1 million watts, which is what makes Vulcan the most powerful laser, as I said, in Western Europe. Now, of course, a power of 1 million watts is 10 times what the CEGB is able to generate in electricity. Clearly, this couldn't be sustained for a long time. And in fact, the duration of the optical pulse in the Vulcan laser is only 1 nanosecond, 10 to the minus 9 of a second, which means a piece of light, which is only about 30 centimeters long. The final output of a laser is not in a single beam, but in fact is subdivided into 6 in order to increase the total power capability. These are the 6 output amplifiers of the laser and the largest components. The amplifying glass, in this case, is fashioned into slabs, which are placed at an angle inside the amplifier housing, where they're surrounded by large flash lamps.
The beams go via yet another optical system into another room and are channeled into the target chamber.
The main purpose of Vulcan is to conduct a wide variety of experiments for over 100 British university and foreign scientists. These all depend on the ability to focus the million watts of power of the laser onto a tiny target which is placed at the center of this chamber. When this power is delivered to the target, it is heated to high temperatures and pressures, such as are found only in the interior of stars or in hydrogen bombs. The objective is to study the characteristics of matter under these conditions.
Vulcan is driven by this computer. It takes half an hour to build the laser up to its huge full power and its pulse of 1,000th of a millionth of a second.
The very intense X-ray emission from these plasmas may enable us to realize the X-ray laser. And with the X-ray laser, it may be possible to unravel the structure of molecules which lie at the center of life itself. And then in another way, the intense thermonuclear emission which is created in the plasmas may be harnessed for economic power production. And so that perhaps our great-great-grandchildren may benefit from an unlimited source of cheap power.
We are in the midst of a worldwide revolution in electronic technology, silicon integrated circuits, new displays, software engineering, information technology. Laser is part of that revolution, not the only part, but is part of it, and to that extent is vital.
Next on this Daytime on 2, we have advice for the